Well, hello and welcome to our second episode of our QEH Talk Sports series. I'm delighted that today we have our first Elizabethan on the line. He left the school to pursue a career as a professional football player and realise his dream of playing in the Premier League. Mr. Alban, of course, taught him everything he knows. It's Bryan. Joe, welcome along. I believe this morning you returned to full contact training. So how was that for you?
Yeah, full contact now. We have been for a week. They were a little bit skeptical with us because we had 3 positive tests in the first week of testing. No, sorry, 2, and then we had 1 the next week. So if we'd had another one, that would have meant our R rate was 1, I think,
Right.
which meant we'd be finished. But luckily we didn't. So yeah, we've been back full training. To be honest, the training's back to normal now. Obviously, you have to turn up in your kit and you have to bring your own drinks and wash your own kit. It's all very like grassroots Sunday league stuff at the moment, but no, it's good to be back.
Takes a bit of getting used to. So yeah, I mean, I've got a series of questions from some of the QEH pupils that are keen to gain a bit of insight into life as a professional footballer. Of course, you went to QEH before you joined the Bristol City Academy.
Yep.
Theo P has kicked things off with a great question, which is basically how hard has it been for you to deal with life in lockdown, both mentally and physically? Because you certainly strike me personally as a person that's very comfortable in their own company. You're able to take a bit of time out to sort of reflect and enjoy the simpler things in life.
Yeah, so I'm fairly introverted anyway, so spending time on my own isn't too difficult. The problem for me is trying to keep fit. That was the main problem. Running up Battersea Park around the river and stuff like that every single day, it does just get boring. But no, the club Fulham were really good at checking in on all the players to make sure lads weren't struggling. And yeah, for me it was all right. It's the same as anyone would just sat at home, just not really knowing what's going on, not knowing with whether the season was getting finished, not knowing sort of talks of pay cuts, etc. All this, and just kind of it's all a little bit up in the air. And you know what it's like when you're not sure what's happening. You can never really relax.
It's been quite tough for you as well, because I imagine a lot of your family and friends are still based down in the southwest in Bristol. Have you managed to see any of them in some degree, or has it been all sort of Skype calls and that kind of thing?
So yesterday was the first time I went back to Bristol since February. So I went back yesterday, sat in the garden at my parents, saw my 6-month-old niece, who I've missed half her life so far. Saw my brothers and their partners and wives and stuff. So yeah, that was nice. But to be honest, I live with one of my best mates up here anyway from before. He was friends with my brother and he used to come down and visit us. So I ended up moving in with him in London. So like I've got friends close, and to be honest, there's a few of the other players that live in the development. So as soon as they relaxed the lockdown a little bit, we started just wandering down for coffees together. So it hasn't been too bad.
Nice. And has lockdown provided a nice sort of period of time for you to sit back and reflect maybe a bit on what you've achieved as a footballer? It's very rare, other than the summer break, that you actually get a period of time this chunky as a footballer to really sort of take time out and take stock of what you've achieved so far.
The thing for me, I wouldn't say take stock. It's more the fact that I was like, I'm almost 27, so I might have 5 years left. That was more. There's more for me is the fact that I'm starting to think, you know what, I'm over halfway through my career now. So yeah, it's quite scary, to be honest. Obviously it's nice to I watched a few of the I think Bristol City were posting a lot about, I think it was 5 years since we won League One. So I watched a bit of that, watched some of the highlights of that, and that took me back a little bit. And just I have gone back and watched a few of the the United game, things like that. Some of the good moments at Fulham as well. And it has been nice to just have a little bit of reflection, I suppose. But no, it's interesting because it's kind of gone from zero and now back in training. It's like, get yourself ready. We're finished. You've got 9 games to get promoted to the Prem next week. It's like, oh right, so we've gone from doing absolutely nothing to full training, full games, and it's gonna be an interesting couple of months.
And has it been as grueling as normal pre-season training as well? Has it been as tough as that, or have you managed to kind of keep a level of fitness so it's not been too much of a shock?
So for me, during like a normal off season, generally we get about 6 weeks off. So I'd take 2 weeks completely off. I do 2 weeks of fairly light, sort of more like flexibility based aerobic work, and then I do the final 2 weeks of like getting myself back to the level. Whereas this time I had a week off, and then we've just been blasted for, I don't even know how long it is, 8, 9, 10 weeks, just constant running. Just because at no point did they know, like, if they'd said early, you won't be going back until 100%. You'd be going back in May or end of May. Like they could have said to us, right, have 3 weeks off, then we can plan. But it was always a case of it might be this week, it might be this week, it might be this week. So yeah, most of the lads are struggling. Fatigue. there'll be a great deal of fatigue come the end of July.
Yeah, and it's a pretty intense schedule because obviously the fixtures have just been released as well. It's a pretty intense schedule of fixtures.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. So I mean, it's two games in a week, isn't it?
Are we looking at? We're looking at Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday, Wednesday, aren't we?
Yeah, and then the playoffs potentially.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. We'll see how all the players deal with that. I'm sure there'll be a few injuries.
Yeah, no doubt. It's when the full squad comes into play. Looking back at your time at QEH, Will H has asked, do you have fond memories of being at the school? What would you say your favourite thing about being at QEH was looking back?
Yeah, I had fond memories. I wanted to stay, to be honest. I wanted to stay and do it's called a scholar. When I signed basically at 16, when I finished my GCSEs, I wanted to stay and do a couple of A levels while I played football. But the school wouldn't, they couldn't. They said to me they can't schedule a whole thing's worth of Spanish on one day, which I kind of understood. But yeah, I had a good time there. Obviously, I had 2 older brothers there as well. So to be honest, I used to get bullied by my older brother's mates. Obviously, I didn't get bullied. They used to just be like mean to me on purpose. But no, I had a good time. There's some good people there, and I don't know how many of the teachers that I still had there but yeah, I enjoyed myself.
And following on from that, Ben H actually asked, can you remember what house you were in? And George B has also said, did you have a favourite lesson along the way? You mentioned Spanish there. Were you a bit of a language lover?
I enjoyed Spanish. Who was my teacher? Mr. Brotherton?
I think Mr. Brotherton.
Would it be Mr. Brotherton? Is he? Yeah. So he was my teacher. He was a Spanish teacher. Yeah, he was my Spanish teacher. Other favourite lesson. I enjoyed history. Yeah, I enjoyed history as well. I can't remember who my teacher was. That's awful. It was 10 years ago now. I was in the blue house. Cars? Is it Cars?
Cars, yes.
That was the house. Yeah, Cars. We were the sporty house when I was there. I don't know. It must change now. Ebbs and flows, doesn't it? But when we were there, we used to win sports there. What were you in?
I was in Birds.
Yes. How can I remember that? And I can't remember my history teacher's name.
Yeah, it's true though. I wonder which houses it, because from a sporting sense, it was always Birds and Cars that were always kind of battling it out from what I remember.
What was the other one? Not Harlequins. Hartnells. Were they were red or green?
They were green and then Ramsey red.
Hated Ramsey.
We don't condone any inter-house violence, by the way. This is all
violence.
friendly.
Yeah.
It's good to have that rivalry. Anyway, Zane has asked, who was your favourite teacher at the school? Maybe a coach and somebody academically as well. I can't remember who the kind of sporting coaches would have been for you around that time, but was there somebody from a sporting sense that stuck out and then somebody from an academic sense as well?
Well, I should really say Mr. Alban, shouldn't I? He joined late though. I think he joined you when I was in year 9. Yeah, him, Mr. Gent. Is Mr. Gent still there?
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Gent. To be honest, I liked all my teachers. I'm not going to sit here and abuse any of my teachers. They were all like really like I've never had a problem with any of them. But favorite teacher, I think that's quite hard. I used to like Mr. Conquest just because he was just really quite entertaining. So for me, like leaving secondary school, because I think because I left early at 16, I've struggled to keep in contact with a lot of the people from school. So I've not seen anyone really from school for years. The only person I'm friends with still from school really is Charlie Gamlin, who I was friends with before. So it's interesting how you lose touch after school, isn't it? You're still friends with a big group of them, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm still friends with a lot of the boys from my year. I won't start reeling names off because nobody wants to hear that. But but you were a very good rugby player as well. When
Yeah.
did you kind of? I mean, it was clear Bristol City always probably had their eye on you from a pretty young age. But I remember watching you play rugby, and because of your speed, particularly, you were very impressive, particularly playing sevens, from what I remember.
Yeah, so I was at year 7 and 8. I played full goo rugby. I think in year 8, I got called up to the year 9-7 squad with Ali Warren and the lads, and yeah, but I think at year 9, Bristol City then went, you can't play anymore because I was a late grower. I didn't grow until I was sort of 17, 18. Excuse me. I was coming to training. I was like dead arms, dead shoulders, and stuff, and they just said, "Look, it's not worth it." So they pulled rank, and I used to sit in the schoolroom and do my homework some afternoons instead of going up and playing rugby. In like November, December, it was beautiful when it was absolutely nailing it down outside, and everyone was like, "Oh, we've got to go to Phelan now and play rugby." And I was sat there going, "I'm just going to get all my homework done in the schoolroom and go home at 2:30. Get ready for training."
Love it. Well, it all paid off in the end. And Will is gone on to ask, what made you want to play football in the first place? Was it something you always had a natural gift for at a young age? And Ben H has asked a similar question. Was football always your aim, even maybe at, primary school as well? Was football clearly where you wanted to be when you were older?
So I think when I was a kid, sort of up until probably 14, I honestly just played because I was good at it. And then at 13, 14, maybe, I had a coach called Dave Horseman that kind of said to me, "Look, like you've got a real chance here. Like if you carry on doing what you're doing, you've got a chance to make a really good career." But when I was young, when I was sort of primary school and stuff, there was never this thing of obviously, like any kid, you're sat there going, "Oh, I'd love to play for England, I'd love to play for Man United and all this," but I never really kind of actually believed it. I was just playing football because I liked it. But as I got to about 14, 15, 16, then I was like, you know what? Deep down, I knew I didn't want to carry on studying. My parents wanted me to do A levels. I would have quite liked to have done them just as a safety net, but deep down, I was like, no, I'm going to make a real go of this. And yeah, there was never really any doubt in my head either. Like I had the sole focus from about that age was just purely to be a professional and to perform at a high level. And in the back of my head, like I know a lot of people talk about like when you've got that like laser focus on something, knowing that you're gonna achieve it, and how important it is just to be completely confident that at some point you will succeed. And I never really had any doubts that I'd get there. And at that time, the aim was to get into the first team at Bristol City. So I never had any doubts that I'd play for the first team at Bristol City. And then once that's done, you reassess, you come back, you make another goal, and you try and become a regular in the team. You try and sign a new contract. You try and get promoted, try and get in team of the year, things like that. And then you try and get a move. And yeah, I think it's just about kind of setting yourself tiny little goals with one big goal in mind. And that was like the big goal was always to play in the Premier League. And it's interesting, once that had been achieved, it was quite hard to come back and be like, right, what's the next goal? That's something I struggled with. But yeah, going back to the original question, I never really until 14, 15, 16 wanted to be like, I'm going to be a footballer, I'm going to be a footballer, I'm going to be a footballer. It's a bit like at school when someone says, "Oh, I'm going to be an astronaut," most people just laugh at you. So it's one of those where you just keep going. try your hardest, and sometimes things like that pay off.
And it's an interesting one, actually, because we spoke to Siali Pietau a fortnight ago, and he was talking about both him and his brother, obviously playing for the Bristol Bears now. And he said, one thing you can become a culprit of is comparing yourself to your peers, particularly if, one of your friends maybe in the same class or in the same rugby team goes off to play for a combination rugby club or their local academy, and you're maybe not quite at that level yet, but everybody develops, at different stages. And that is important, isn't it? Not setting yourself those goals, like you say, but not necessarily comparing yourself to anybody else.
So that's not just a sport thing, that's across everything. One of the things that I always say to people is everyone's running their own race. Like you'll see a lot of I'll speak about it from a football point of view, but when I was 12, 13, there's obviously a lot of lads grew a lot quicker, big, strong boys, really fast, and everyone at that age is going core like that. Some player, that boy, some player, and I could name 4 or 5. I won't name them, but at that age, they're the best in the country. They're playing for England. If you look at them now, they might be playing in non-league. They might be not playing football at all. So it's just about like realizing that everyone develops at a different speed. Everyone has different strengths, different weaknesses, and it's just about concentrating on, as cheesy as it sounds, being the best you that you can be, like at that time, making sure that if it's at training, you go to training and you work as hard as you can. If it's at school, you go to school and you do all your work properly and you try as hard as you can. Sometimes you might, I can't say it, you might mess it up. I can't say the word I was going to say. You might mess it up and you get it wrong, but mistakes are the best way of learning. The best way of learning is to make mistakes. And I've made thousands, if not millions, of mistakes. Any successful person in the world will tell you that mistakes are honestly the easiest and the best way to learn, and that's how you'll be successful in anything.
And actually, you touched on it there, managing your school life as well. Jacob H has actually gone on to ask, how did you juggle your studying with the football? I mean, you come from a very academic family as well. So did they sort of press you to maintain your studying as well as the football?
I did used to struggle, to be honest, at the start, like early on in secondary school, because obviously the work is so long ago now, but I think the workload goes up massively from like primary school to secondary school, and that's when I was training more. So I started training 3 nights a week. Some teachers were very lenient on me, and I'd go in and say, look, I had training last night, can I have an extra day to do homework? And a lot of them were all right with that. I used to have to I used to just do my homework at break times. I'd do it at like 9, 10 o'clock at night when I come in from training. It's obviously paid off, even though even if my brain's gone a bit from not studying for a few years.
Well, mine certainly has, so don't worry, you're not the only one. Thomas S has asked if you could change one thing, perhaps from when you first joined the school in year 7 to where you are now. Maybe it's a piece of advice you would have given yourself. If you could change one thing along the way, what would it be?
Oh,
it's a tough one.
Change one thing. No, I wouldn't change. Yeah, I wouldn't change. Unless like a little thing, like I probably wouldn't have passed the ball to Bernardo SILVA for him to tap it in against Man City last year. Little things like that I'd not change. But no, to be honest, no, I'm quite happy with kind of where I am and what I've achieved so far, and quite content with the amount of effort and work I've put in. I think that's something that that's quite a good message, really. Just I've always kind of lived in a way where I put everything into, like I used to, same with schoolwork. I wasn't that intelligent, but I put everything into making sure that I got good grades. Same with football. I put everything into making sure that I do all right. I'm not that talented, but I just charge around a lot and kick people. So no, I wouldn't change anything.
Good. There's always a reason behind every decision you make, and like you say, as long as you learn from the mistakes you make, that's the most important thing. Now, Thomas, another one from Thomas, he has asked, there's a bit of a difference, of course, from playing up at mighty Fayland to then stepping out and performing in front of 25,000 people and more when you're playing at all these big stadiums last season. You quickly became a fan favourite at Ashton Gate. What is it like when you first step out, maybe for the first couple of games, representing Bristol City in front of all those fans?
Horrible, nerve-wracking. I felt sick. It was horrific. Yeah, but once I'd settled in, it is. I'm not just saying it because obviously I've got a soft spot for the club, but the new stadium and playing at that ground is pretty special. It's a lovely, lovely place to play football. I was obviously benefited a little bit because I was a homegrown talent. I was afforded a little bit more time, and I was afforded a little bit of grace from the fans for some of the decisions that I might make on the pitch. But yeah, it's a good place to play football.
And I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'd imagine one of the highlights was that goal against Manchester United that comes up time and time again. You're probably almost sick of talking about it slightly. Finn C has asked, what were you thinking in that moment when it hit the back of the net? Were you sort of thinking this almost raises my profile a little bit now, and that's going to be going down in folklore, that goal among Bristol City fans?
Yeah, I was like, get me a move. No, it wasn't like that. That was a joke. That was a joke, just to clarify. Nah, it's only a joke. No, the only things I can remember from it are, I can remember Marcus Rojo, I think it was. He slid across to try and block it. I can remember taking a touch. I can remember thinking, I've got to set my feet here. So I did a few little steps, and I remember just thinking, hit it across the goal, bang. And then the next thing I heard was it just hit the corner of the post, I think, as it went in, and I just ran off like that. Like I couldn't, to be honest, like I couldn't even believe it. It's just nice, like, because I know the main thing for me is looking back at it is because I know my whole family was there. It's just nice to know, like, things like my dad and my parents, like, just making them proud, and also my brother's a Man United fan, so annoying him. So he's actually openly said to me, like, I didn't know whether to be annoyed or happy. His younger brother scored against Man United and beat them, and he was annoyed that Man United had lost. That's the kind of family I come from.
Thing is, I never understand what you do. You must be so overcome with emotion in that moment. I think I'd sort of struggle more knowing how to celebrate after a moment like that, because you've got all these people watching. You know, it's such a huge moment. I sort of didn't know what to do with myself.
No, I did struggle. If you watch the celebration, I didn't know what I did. I was doing this. I was giving myself a high five. I was just, yeah. And then I remember we were all just in the huddle and, like, on the floor, like a pylon, and everyone's just laughing. And same as when Corey's goal went in, everyone was just laughing, like, what on earth is, like, what is happening? Like, things like this don't happen, or they might happen once or twice in a career. So, yeah.
And those are the moments you remember when you're actually sharing, I suppose, like you say, on the floor with your teammates, and laughing about what is actually happening. And then, of course, beyond that, ultimately you made the move to Fulham.
Mm-hmm.
And Matthew has asked, what made you choose? I mean, this is obviously such a big story that rumbled on and on and on about what happened on deadline day. You chose Fulham. What made you choose Fulham, other than the obvious that you were going to be playing in the Premier League over a move to Aston Villa?
That was it. Honestly, that was it. That was the I got a phone call after the bid had been accepted by Bristol City. I got a phone call from the manager of Fulham that just said, look, was it Wednesday or Thursday? I think deadline day was Thursday. So this was Wednesday afternoon. It said, look, Joe, we want you to come and play for Fulham, and I want you to start against Crystal Palace on Saturday. And I've said it before, if someone hands you your lifelong dream to you in 2 days' time, you're not saying no. You're not saying no. Obviously, like, Aston Villa is a huge club, so for me, I was thinking, right, this is a big decision. Like, this is a big decision. To turn down a really big club like Villa, because I knew they'd be fighting, and whether they were going to get promoted that year or not, I knew that they'd be up there and potentially getting promoted. But then I looked at Fulham's squad on paper, and it was a very, very, very good team. You had sort of John Mikel Seri, Andre Schürrle, players like that coming in. I just didn't think we'd be down the bottom. But such is life. That's football, and yeah, we still had a great time.
Absolutely. And I suppose you don't know whether you're actually going to necessarily get that chance again anyway. But
Might have got
Paulie,
injured. Might have got injured.
well,
Might have got
exactly.
injured that season, and if I do my knee, break my ankle or something like that, and miss 6 months of the season, come back, I'm not quite where I was. I don't get the move, and then I don't get to play in the Premier League. So yeah, I don't regret my decision one bit.
And Paul Lee has said, was there a big step up from the Championship to the Premier League in terms of pace, physicality, and to cope with that? How many hours do you train per week now? I assume it's, you'd still maintain those sorts of standards that you had in the Premier League, but did you see that big step up, and did you have to alter your training technique to cope with it?
To be honest, coming from Bristol City to Fulham, it's not a slight on Bristol City one bit, but you can tell Fulham's been a Premier League club for a long time. The kind of the detail and stuff that goes into training, nutrition, gym work, everything is just like top class. And I thought it was just like going into the top division thing, but when we've come back down into the Championship, they've maintained the same thing. So on the step ups is a really hard one to explain. Premier League players, they just don't make mistakes. When the ball gets fired into them, they kill the ball stone dead, and the touch is perfect. Whereas in the Championship, you might get someone that does that 7 out of 10 times, but a couple of times you can nick the ball. In the Premier League, if you lose the ball in your own half, they'll have a shot. That's just the standard of the player. So it's more about just kind of consistently making the right decisions in the Prem, as opposed to it being a lot faster and stronger. Most players at those kind of top levels, and some players into League One now, because the standard's going up and up. Most players physically are on par with one another. I don't think you'd see much of a disparity between speeds of the top players across the top 2 leagues, definitely.
And on the same lines, Owen J had an interesting question. What about your running technique? He asked whether there's a method you use. Maybe Owen is working on that side of his game. Is there a method you use to kind of make sure you're as fast and as agile as possible?
Nah, just run. Just run as fast as I can. No, that's an interesting one actually. I know I'm laughing, but we've had when I played for Bristol City, we had Colin Jackson. Remember the old sprinter? Was he a hurdler? Was he a sprinter or a hurdler? He came in and
I just know him from being a pundit now.
He was fast. Yeah, he was fast, and he tried to do some sprint mechanics, but you get to kind of 24, 25, and let's be honest, you're not changing how you're running.
No.
When you're chasing a football, your technique's not going to change, is it? And a lot of the lads ended up getting sort of stiff hamstrings and stuff, and that got quickly binned off. So no, there's no technique. You just run how you run. That's just unless your gait is really, really bad, I think you just crack on with what you do.
And as for the Premier League, you mentioned Bernardo Silva there, for example. Toughest player you've come up against? George H wants to know both the best player you've played alongside and the toughest competitor maybe in the Premier League.
The toughest game I had. The best player I've played, there's a difference. The best player I've played is probably Bernardo Silva or David Silva. Those two are there's just something about the way they play. They're not exceptionally fast, but you can't get near them. You just cannot get near them. They're always just, you try and like take a little swipe at them, and they always just skip away from you. And I just don't know how they do it. Yeah, so they're the best players. The toughest game I've had against was Mikel Antonio at West Ham, because he is just a brute. He's just so fast and strong. We played West Ham at the Olympic Stadium on a Friday night, absolutely pouring with rain, freezing cold. And honestly, I've never been treated. He treated me like a little kid. He just treated me like a little kid. He just bullied me for 90 minutes, and afterwards I was just like, you know what? Sometimes someone's just on their game, and he was on it that night.
Yeah, I'm gonna flip it on its. Is there a player that you came up against that you thought would be a lot better than they were, and you actually coped with them quite well?
Oh, that's tempting fate a little bit, isn't it? Because what if I come up against them again? So for me, I don't mind playing against players like Raheem Sterling, who are very kick it down like Aaron Lennon, kick it down the line and do you for pace because I'm quite quick, and I can often see that coming. So players like that, I'm not like. Don't get me wrong, Raheem Sterling's very good, incredibly strong player. But that's the kind of player I wouldn't mind playing against, as opposed to a kind of inside midfield player that's very good at passing the ball on, or a big, just brutish kind of winger. Big, strong boys, yeah. And the best player, what was the other one? Best player I've played with?
Yes, best player you played with.
Yeah, so we signed Ryan Babel last January, and came in, and I know there was a lot of sort of skepticism around him. Sort of, I think he's 32, pink hair. Never really did much at Liverpool, but best player, just best guy, best player, best attitude that I've come across. Yeah, he's just for a sort of post 30. I've never seen anyone that sharp, that willing to put the work in to improve at that age, and I suppose that's why he's played for Holland so many times. That's why he's still going, playing for Ajax at 33. So yeah, he's an incredible player.
And just going back now to maybe your life outside of football, Ben, I've noticed Ben couldn't resist asking a few questions about your personal life. He asked the same question. I think Ben asked the same question to Siali Piatau last week. He asked, outside of football, he wants to know, what car do you drive?
I've just changed, actually. I had a Audi R8, and I have just swapped it for a RS Q8. So like a more sort of a bigger, comfier car, because my hamstrings and my back were not in a good place regarding the two-seater I was driving with me legs up here. Yeah.
And he actually,
I should have just said, yeah, I've got a Golf.
Yeah.
Should have said, yeah, I bike. I only bike around London. Yeah.
Bring it back down to my sort of level. He also wants to know who the most famous person is in your phone contacts. Or can that not be disclosed?
The most famous person. I can't show the number, but I don't know if you can read that.
Oh, there you go. That's a strong answer.
I'll put it this way: he hasn't got my number, but yeah.
Can we officially link you to a summer move to Chelsea now? Is that what that's all about? Or
absolutely not. That was to do with I think it was to do with some charity thing. A year or so ago. So nothing exciting.
And just going back to one of the earlier questions about the best player you played alongside, was there a best player that you could name at Bristol City that you played alongside? Maybe that doesn't necessarily get the credit you think they deserve.
Best player. No, realistically, the best, technically the most gifted player. I played with the three technically gifted players I played with at Bristol City were J. Emmanuel Thomas. His ability was just out of this world, and it's such a shame that attitude-wise and work rate wise, it just wasn't quite there, because he was some player. Lee Tomlin, just some of the things I used to see that guy do with the football, I don't know how he does them, but I'll leave the rest of Lee Tomlin for another time. And Bobby Reed, just honestly, some of the ball manipulation and in the boxes and stuff, he's one of the most, if not the most talented player I played with at Bristol. Yeah.
And not
Bristol
your friend
City,
Aidan
sorry,
Flint.
not Bristol. No, not Flint.
Don't worry, I'll bleep that bit out. So finally, we've got a couple more questions. One from Finn J. He just wants to say hi to your brother because he used to be taught by him.
No, I'll tell him. No, I won't.
Pass that one on.
Finn J. Yeah, I'll pass that one on. I assume it's.
And then going back to this season, do you Finn M this time has asked whether you think the team's performance
in this class.
Yeah, I know. Heaps of them.
What was the question? Sorry.
He just asked whether you think the team's performance might be impacted by playing behind closed doors. Do you think it might affect a potential automatic promotion push?
So I think some teams will be affected. I don't think we will. I think we've played in a stadium for most of the season with one stand missing, which it has impacted the atmosphere. So we're kind of used to it. I've spent about 5 years of my career playing at stadiums that are being renovated by now.
Yeah, true.
I think so. I think some teams will. Some teams, sort of, some of the more passionate teams in the league, they'll find it strange, and hopefully it can play into our hands, because I think we've got a lot of very technically gifted players that might thrive with no crowd pressure and none of that. So yeah, I don't think it'll affect us, but some teams hopefully.
Yeah. Well, I think it may be a team like Leeds' downfall come the end of the season, because obviously Ellen Road is a passionate place and a tough place to go and play football. And I'd imagine the crowd have an awful. Certainly when Bristol City played there earlier on in the season,
it's a hell of an atmosphere. Yeah, that place. They do whip up a good atmosphere. So we'll see. We'll see. Obviously, we're sitting third, and I don't want to tempt fate, but
no.
No, they'll be fine. Leeds are going to be fine. We're going to do our best to try and catch them. Yeah, I think, no, honestly, like, sort of, in all seriousness, I think it will be an interesting 9 games for a lot of players, and it'll be interesting to see who the ones motivated to run and really work hard when there aren't fans watching. It'd be interesting.
Well, thank you very much for your time. And you probably want to put your feet up now after a pretty intense morning of training, but we wish you all the best for the remainder of the season. And hopefully, well, I'm saying hopefully, I'm hoping you don't face Bristol City in a playoff final. Hopefully you sneak into those automatic spots, and you'll be playing against Bristol City in the Premier League next season.
That would be the dream.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Joe.
Cheers, mate.